After years of neglect, my entitled family demands my house for my stepsister, who aspires to be an escort and OnlyFans model. My spoiled stepsister, whose boyfriend dumped her and left her with nothing, sought to force me out of my own home to give it to her. Her stepmother and father were being very neglectful. My 62-year-old, stingy, egotistical, and frequently absent father recently found out how much I'll make. Surprisingly, he has made the decision to remove me from my own home in the name of family. Ash, 29, my stepsister and the little darling of my father who never does anything wrong, has become pregnant out of nowhere. Obviously, she struggles to find a place to live despite her extremely independent dreams of being an escort and an OnlyFans model. Daddy needs me to repair everything now, and I am the solution. Sadly, I have to give this woman my house and my hard-earned money since she made all the wrong decisions. My father publicly rejected me on several occasions as a duty, but he's been quite touchy about our shared ancestry ever since he learned about my new residence, employment, and, shockingly, income. He's trying to make me feel closer to his wife and her children, which is something I appreciate, but I'm not exactly thrilled with him constantly telling me who my father is. She is, after all, my dad's child as well, but I was rejected by this woman far too soon to feel any sort of relationship with her. I'm glad I didn't because I would be so let down. I just wanted to remind everyone that I'm here to vent my emotions. Okay? Before you all start, I have feelings, ideas, and opinions that I would like to express. Even if you may not agree with them and think they sound bad, I'm telling you nonetheless because, quite honestly, I have no one else to tell. Let me now introduce you to my half-sister, Ash, also known as Ashlyn. She's literally making her dad proud, and she's about 5 years younger than me. My father calls this woman his pride, but she's just an escort, sleeping around with a few OnlyFans, so I think he's insane. Yes. You read correctly. He probably doesn't understand the big picture. Who will inform him? I'm not particularly conservative, but I do my best to prioritize my work and principles. When I have free time, I attempt to get to know women better by pursuing them. There may occasionally be a spark, but other variables like availability and long-distance problems also come into play. Sometimes there is a complete lack of understanding. I make an effort not to sleep with strangers. I believe I should hold out for the ideal woman. I find it repulsive to have a large body count. I'm not sure why. Men flaunt it like a medal. Anyhow, disgusting. I make use of this in my own life. Sadly, my stepsister feels the exact opposite way. She's an escort, and she's definitely lost count of her physical partners. Even if I find that repulsive in and of itself, it's also incredibly hazardous. Some men enjoy doing strange things to their escorts. How anyone could think that working in that manner is acceptable is beyond me. Then, in an attempt to profit from it, she posts offensive images and videos of herself online. It's a bust for whatever reason, but she doesn't have much luck there, and most likely doesn't know how to get the traffic going. How am I aware of this? This is a humiliating story. I learned about it from a buddy. He claimed that after they met for a drink, Ash texted him once to ask if he wanted to go out and have fun. After hearing the story, I became a little hotter because the guy had dated my sister, but he claimed it had happened before he realized she was my sister. He claimed that she had sent him the link to her page, and he also showed it to me. I'm not sure whether this is true. It's not working out so well for her because she's always broke and begging her dad for money. I never mentioned it to my dad either because I couldn't bring myself to ask her straight out. I once observed her answering a phone and then getting into the car with an older man. After giving her flowers, they departed by car. At strange hours, she would slip back inside the house through the window. When I used to return home for the holidays from college, I noticed this. Though I'm not sure if she's still doing it, I don't want to be involved in any of it. I finally feel content at work because I hold a reputable position. Since my dad was disturbed enough to send me away whenever he got the chance, I haven't lived with the new family for very long, but I've gotten to know Ash well enough to report that she looks a lot like her 58-year-old mother, Marissa. She was Marissa. She would think that, at her peak, she was quite the icon. She was rather appealing to womanizing men like my dad and had worked as a flight attendant in the past. Now, if you get what I mean, she's your standard botched face Karen. She runs a type of neighborhood daycare with claw-like hands and longer nails than lipstick. It's strange that parents would entrust their children to the care of Edward Scissorhands. Her long nails may poke out a child's eye. Either way, she's as sharp as her nails. She loves to make trouble in other people's lives and has an opinion on everything. She possesses a voice as awful as the ocean and more plastic in her body. She's as real as imitation leather. She has a negative influence on Dad. She didn't want to raise a child that wasn't her own, which I think was a big part of why my dad didn't hesitate to send me away to boarding school when I was 8 years old. Let me now tell you about my father. In a way, he is the primary issue in this whole thing. Even if it's not warranted, He believes that everything he does in life is because he's lived a full life and knows better. He says that because I'm not like him, he regrets having me. Thankfully, I'm not. My mother was a powerful lady. They had a falling out, but she took wonderful care of my dad and knew what was important to her. She used to remind me that my dad wasn't terrible. He was just a different person, and I should never forget that no matter what happens. She had a wonderful heart, though. She didn't want to sabotage my ideas about my father. He was certainly as intolerable to her then as he is now. A few months later, they got divorced and separated. My dad married Marissa 2 months after the divorce when I was 4 years old. After my mother died in a vehicle accident, they had Ash when I turned 5. She was on her way to collect me from school, so I can never forget it. She was always punctual. She was only ever 10 minutes late once. Although it was only 10 minutes, it felt like an hour to me. An intoxicated person struck her at a crosswalk. She did not survive, although he did. In a few years, he got a DUI, and I was left all alone. After I waited in school for 2 hours, they finally came to fetch me. I was misled and perplexed ever since my father arrived. He asked Marissa what they should do about me, and I'll never forget how annoyed he was when she responded, "Your kid, your problem." "Exactly, Dad. Now you can't come and tell me I'll have to care for your spoiled child." I finally have a secure career and run a couple small enterprises on the side. I've been working hard since I was 15 years old and earning money ever since. After boarding school, I went to college and only came home for the holidays, so I've been living on my own since I was 8. I worked hard to get where I am now and recently purchased a home. It's a wonderful little place, far superior to the shared apartment I had with my buddies. It was a life goal I believed I would never achieve. The thing is, I only moved in last month. I may not like my family enough, but basic decency dictated that I include them in such a significant event, so I invited them to the housewarming as well. My father's reaction was quite sad to behold. To be honest, he appeared envious and a little annoyed when he inquired about the furniture, architect, and interior designer. I told him what I felt was good enough information, and he answered with taunts like, "I wouldn't know. You never bothered telling me," in an attempt to get attention, exposing our strained relationship in front of acquaintances and coworkers, including my boss. A week passed before I received a call from him. I was at work and had a complicated project to manage. He said he wanted to meet because it was essential, so I agreed. When I got home, I noticed a very irate Marissa and a swollen, red-eyed Ash giving me a side-eye from the living room. Dad was in the kitchen, removing bottles of alcohol from the refrigerator. He offered me one, but I politely declined. Worried about what he'd say, I asked him what he wanted me for, and he lifted his brows and responded with another inquiry, asking if I'd finally started caring about us. I scowled in perplexity since I didn't comprehend what he was saying. He invited me to join Ashley and Marissa in the living room. I nodded, then sat down on a couch across from the two. Ash folded her arms, and Marissa rolled her eyes. Dad went in and sat besides them, facing me. He placed his beer bottle on the coffee table and leaned back. He then questioned if I was blind. There was a delay, bewilderment on my end, and rage on theirs, most likely. Before I could react, he said that either I was blind or I chose not to see what needed to be seen. He stated that I had probably become overly proud since I bought a property and failed to look at the people who truly mattered to me. I groaned and inquired what he meant by all of that, requesting that he be more specific. He blew sarcastically and told me I wasn't concerned about the serious situation in the room. He explained that I elected not to perceive the family in danger and had decided not to give any assistance. Obviously, I inquired as to what he meant by jeopardy. He looked across at Ash, who rolled her eyes and revealed that she was pregnant. Like any reasonable person, I wanted to congratulate her, but she burst into tears before I could. Marissa hugged her and told me I should know what was going on at home and that I should care enough to inquire. Ash has recently discovered she is pregnant, according to her father, and the boy who is responsible has ended their relationship as a result. Marissa added that Ash has opted to keep it, and we should base our future decisions on that. All I could say was, "Can she afford it?" Ash and Marissa gave me death stares. Honestly, I meant well. That was my concern. In my thoughts, I had already assumed that they wanted me to contribute money to help her out, and I was more than willing to do so. But then Dad got up, moved over to my side, and sat down beside me. He then stated that this is why he called me. He stated that he is a good parent to his daughter, and while my mother may not have taught me how to be a good brother, brothers will offer their lives for the comfort of their sisters. I beg your pardon. I know my financial contribution is required, but I'm not going to die for her. I sighed and asked what he wanted me to do about it. He grinned and slapped my back, saying, "That's a good boy." I gave a phony smile that faded as soon as Dad said, "You're giving your house to Ashlyn." "No, I'm not." "Yes, that's what I said." Dad immediately frowned. He asked me why not, so I informed him that I could help out with some money, but the house house was mine. I can lend her a room without charge until she can afford to pay for it. Dad sprang from his seat and exclaimed, "Nonsense! It makes perfect sense to me, Dad." But he urged me to not only give her the house, but also leave and buy another for myself. I argued that Ash couldn't afford to pay the bills and manage the house while pregnant and unemployed. Dad explained that these would also be my responsibilities. Excuse me, hell to the no. I was outraged, but I had to be respectful, so I stood up and informed him that was not feasible and that I would be going. Then I left. He did not stop there. He then arrived at my place a week later while I was at work. I'm not sure how he got inside or where he got the keys, but when I arrived home, I noticed men putting boxes outside the house, boxes full of my belongings. I hurried inside and inquired what they were doing, and they said the house owner had told them to throw those items away. I yelled that I was the owner of the house and that they should get my belongings back inside and leave immediately. I lost my cool, but this was not what I had anticipated to see when I returned home. I went inside to see Dad and Ash, who were still standing there, demanding that I do what a brother should do. I told them to leave, but they didn't listen very well. I threatened them with a call to the police. That's when they eventually departed. They used profanity and other derogatory language against me. Now I realize this is a lot to read, but it was even worse in person. A week has passed and I feel horrible about it, which is why I am blogging here. Was I wrong? I feel like they need me and I shouldn't abandon them like this, but I also feel like there are boundaries to what I'm willing to do for them. It irritates me how detached and unconcerned they were with me as I grew up, and now they ask me to give my life for them. Isn't it a bit much? Let me know. I cannot even include my friends in this. You're all I have right now. Update. Hello everyone. I hope you are all well. It's been a week since I posted, and I honestly didn't expect it to receive the response it did. I read the comments as they came in, and some made me doubt a lot of things, but I eventually decided not to break off my family completely. This was because I got a call from Ash. She said she wanted to meet with me and I accepted. She offered to meet at my place because she wanted to tell me a few things, but I was still healing from the last incident. As a result, I demanded we meet somewhere else. We walked to a coffee cafe and she seemed apprehensive at first. She is normally haughty and unpleasant, yet she appeared to be a different person. We sat in the corner and she informed me she had recently split up. I responded that I had an idea when Dad mentioned that the guy who got her pregnant had left her. She shook her head and stated, "That's what Dad thinks." I asked her what it was truly about, and she told me that her father believes her boyfriend left her because he has commitment issues. But in truth, she is the one with commitment issues. Isn't that shocking? She claimed to care deeply for this man, but he had learned a few things about her only a few days before she informed him of her pregnancy. When they met, he wanted to confront her about those things, but she spoke first, which infuriated him even further. In that moment, he went insane and punched a hole in the wall. She claimed he scared her then. He informed her that he was breaking up with her and departed without hearing her response. She's been calling him regularly, but he doesn't answer. He's only texted her back once, telling her that she needed to get rid of the kid first and then notify him. Only then will he speak to her, but she needs to get rid of the youngster first. Now I realize I humiliated a saint, but this person, I do not like this guy at all. I merely asked her what he'd discovered, and she said it'd be awkward to tell his brother about it. I sort of got that. She was undoubtedly referring to the OnlyFans and the Escort, so I shrugged and said it was fine if she didn't want to tell me. Before I could ask her why she had asked to meet with me, she took a long breath and exhaled. Then she told me she'd been involved in shady activities. I was worried because I didn't want to hear the confirmation of my fears, but I did. She told me she wanted to paint and be an artist, but Marissa told her it wouldn't lead to a decent life or money. Ash was instructed that she should find a man as soon as possible. She quickly began to attract the attention of elderly guys, which initially creeped her out. When she told Marissa about it, she assured Ash that it was a good thing. It was the older men who knew what to do with their money, and they were the only ones making any money at all. Ash was only 19 at the time, and Marissa advised her that college wouldn't or couldn't provide her with a pleasant, comfortable life. Ash possessed youth, and many people were willing to pay for it. Ash decided she wanted to be a model. She attempted to go to several modeling agencies, but none appeared interested in her. Then she met a man in his 40s who said he could find her a job. He took her to parties and bought her costly clothes and jewelry for the occasion, and she was overjoyed until she learned about her first job. It turned out she was going to sell her time to a man in exchange for a modeling gig. She expected it to be just supper, but it turned out to be an entire night, which she spent. She did obtain a modest modeling job, taking images for a small brand, but that was it. A few more men used her while she hoped for a job in return, but she was told they didn't choose her. She later discovered that the guy who had invested in her was actually selling her. He was earning money off of her. She felt it was foolish to confront him about it because she was worried he might murder her. So she informed him she didn't want to pursue modeling anymore and was content with minimum income employment. Thankfully, he let her depart without incident. She subsequently attempted to wait tables in bars, but it was difficult for her. That's what hard-earned money is, Ash. However, she also stated that Marissa would embarrass her for preferring to complete those minor tasks. She'd tell her that women are the world's beauty, and they should only shine and grin like showpieces. They need to be well cared for, and so on. So Ash began going out with men only for dinner, but she charged for it. She stated that there were many loners out there who simply wanted to communicate, but this also resulted in stalkers and obsessive guys who believed they were owed more than their money. She realized that chatting with men and getting them to feel attached to her was more difficult than sleeping with them, so she began escorting. It worked perfectly, until a buddy informed her about OnlyFans. She tried to get it going, but she wasn't very skilled with cameras or editing. She wasn't sociable enough, and it took a lot of effort, so it didn't work out either. She then met her boyfriend, who was an ex-co-worker. He worked as a barista, and they met again. She really liked him, but he was overly clingy. He was also protective, and he didn't trust her very much. Granted, he had every reason to disbelieve her because she was still on OnlyFans and was being escorted without his knowledge. She stopped escorting and OnlyFans totally, and her boyfriend began taking care of her with the money he earned, which she was pleased with. Marissa wasn't, however. But then she became pregnant, and her boyfriend found out everything. She mentioned that she had a couple males on her list who could be possible fathers. They all contribute money to support the child. One of them had even proposed to her, but she knows they're all doing it because they believe they're the only ones available, which is ridiculous given that they know she's an escort. However, she does not reveal the cause. It covers her bills and will most likely help with the child. She said she decided to tell me all this since she couldn't tell her father, and he thinks she's only been modeling here and there for little money, and that she had one partner in her life who left her when he should have stayed. Marissa is aware of the majority of the details and proposes that Ash marry the man who proposed and make him believe he is the father. But Ash has no idea what to tell his father. She also does not want to marry the guy since he is eccentric and ancient, and she does not want people to accept a lie. I asked her what she wanted me to help with, and she responded that some financial assistance would be acceptable, and she wants me to reconcile with Dad. She suggested that I agree to Dad's request and then move out for a while. Then I may return when the situation is less heated. How is that a solution? I politely denied her offer, explaining that I could only contribute cash and was unwilling to move out of my own home. She then told me I was selfish for thinking that way, that she had revealed her entire life to me, and that I lacked the courtesy to help her even then. She stated that Dad was correct about me, and that I deserved to be put in an orphanage rather than being taken in when I needed a place to live. She stood up and stomped off. I don't think my response was overly excessive, but is it really selfish? What do you think about her version of the story? Does this justify her demands? Should I trust her? I believe she was telling the truth, but does that imply I should do what she is asking for? Let me know, everyone. Update. This issue is picking at my brain right now. Another week has passed, and several things have occurred. I thought I'd hit the keys and keep you all updated. Thank you for your support on my previous update, everyone. It's such a comfort to have people endorse my ideas for once. Anyway, after meeting Ash, I received a call from Dad. He wanted to meet me at the bar and discuss a few things. Curious, I agreed and went to see him. We sat at the counter, and he mentioned that he knew how much I'd make. I asked him why it was important, and he replied that he knew I could afford to buy another property in a few years. I shrugged and told him I already had a house, and that this conversation should be put to an end. He insisted that I hadn't started a family yet, and that it was more difficult for women to raise a child on their own. That kid needs a safe place to call home. So I reminded Dad that Ash had been living with them for a long time, and there appeared to be no problems. A small baby will not hurt. I also asked him how she would manage living alone in a whole house while pregnant. I explained that she needed to be around people so that she could be cared for. That's when my dad shocked me once more. He stated that he and Marissa would move in with Ash in my house. I could not believe my ears. Before I could react, the bartender gave a sardonic chuckle. Dad took offense and asked him what he found so funny. Ash, he responded. He claimed she uses everyone and then discards them. My father asked him if he knew who he was talking about, and he nodded, stating that he was her lover. My eyes expanded. So he was the guy. Dad balled his fists and spoke aggressively to the man, questioning why he thought it was okay to establish a family he couldn't support. The guy raised his hands and told his dad that he was not accountable for the family in question. He also had no desire to raise someone else's child. Dad dared him to explain why he believed that. He laughed and told us that he had a vasectomy last year since he did not want children, but Ash still became pregnant. He also saw her driving away with different men after lying to him about where she was going. Then he discovered she had an OnlyFans. He said he didn't want to believe any of it. Ash finally told him they were carrying a kid, and it was the final straw for him. He couldn't have a child, so this verified everything. He confessed to Ash that she had been cheating on him all along, and he knew she confessed. All I could see was Dad's face go from angry to shocked to disappointed, and my ears were glued to the guy's voice. He shrugged and informed us that he owed Ash nothing. Rather, she owed him money, time, honesty, and, at the absolute least, affection. He claimed he wasn't sure whether Dad knew anything about it, but he was certain no father would be proud of a son like that. Dad clenched his lips, got off the stool without saying anything, and walked away. Later that evening, he texted me, saying he needed to go pick up Marissa from her yoga session. I'm not sure what happened after that, but I know there was something since the next day. I found Ash at my door crying. She told me I had ruined everything. I took her inside to prevent a disturbance and calmed her down by telling her that I hadn't told Dad anything. Her lover happened to be the bartender where my father and I had gone. She then informed me that her father advised her to cease everything and stay at home. He expressed dissatisfaction with her and said he never expected her to engage in such behavior. He advised her to change her behavior and meet a suitable man. Then he pointed out that her chances of meeting excellent men were minimal. Now I listened and hugged her. She apologized for assuming it was me because Dad had just returned home from meeting with me when he confronted her. I forgave her, and she returned home. While she was yelling and telling me how terrible she felt, she stated that Marissa was rather quiet when Dad was discussing excellent women and their loyalty, as if she could say anything. Ash mentioned one of the topics she can't talk about. I asked her what she meant, and she replied that Marissa couldn't have an opinion since she was doing yoga. I could only frown in perplexity as Ash continued to cry as she recounted what had transpired. Yoga? Stick with me. What do you believe actually happened? Is Ash still going to be Dad's pride? No one has approached me since. I'll see and let you know. I realize you probably didn't expect me to respond so quickly, but I couldn't help it. Update. Just 2 days after my last upload, I'm here for those who have asked. Ash's ex's name is irrelevant, but we can refer to him as Bob. This is the new bit. So the day before yesterday, I went to see Dad. I informed him I had made a few decisions. I explained that I wanted to help Ash raise her child and that I was willing to lend her a room. I'd be willing to pay for diapers and other necessities, but she needs to get work as quickly as possible. Dad informed me that there would be no one with a baby, so I suggested she try freelancing or working from home. Dad wasn't being his regular gruff self this time. He paused, then sighed. He sat down on the couch and told me he believed I despised him. He was correct, but I asked why he believed so. He claimed it was because his mother despised him as well. I instantly informed him that my mom never told me that. Instead, she always told me my father loved and cared about me. I informed him that the only reason I was disappointed was because my perception of my dad was incorrect. Mom told me everything, and all I sensed from Dad was neglect and a lack of care. He scratched his eyes and told me he hated himself for many reasons. He said he liked Mom, but they hadn't known each other long enough to determine if they were the right match. He sighed and explained that he got her pregnant, which was why he had to marry her. She was a good wife, but he never felt a connection between them. Then he met Marissa. When he said it, my insides tingled. I could not move. All of this was new to me. Dad informed me that Marissa lit a flame within him that he was unaware of. He was quite pleased with her, and before he realized it, he had feelings. Before he could figure out what was right and wrong, he got Marissa pregnant. He then explained to Marissa that it was wrong, but it was too late. She was pregnant. He told her to wait. He wanted to tell his mother first, but Marissa felt insecure and came to our house. She told Mom everything. Mom confronted Dad, and he accepted it. It was a pretty unpleasant episode since Mom was deeply offended. Nonetheless, she politely requested a divorce from her father. My parents split because my father had an affair with my stepmother, which resulted in her pregnancy. I'm not sure how bad this man could get. Dad paused and looked over at me. He stated that he'd had a good year with Marissa. Marissa despised the fact that he had to bring me home after my mother died. She was once again concerned that Dad would prioritize me over their baby due to guilt or whatever. so he sent me to residential school 3 years later. Then, I never had to stay at home for long enough to make Marissa uncomfortable. Love makes you do stupid things, he explained, and I wanted to punch this dude in the face, but I kept it under control. I turned around to see Marissa waiting in the doorway, a water bottle in hand. She stated she was simply leaving for yoga class, set her bottle on the table, and went into the kitchen. I blinked, and before I could think clearly, she was back and out the door. I was numb, so I followed her outside. I picked up her water bottle and returned it to her. When I went out, she had already gotten into her car and was driving away. I needed a trip to clear my head, so I sat calmly in my car and drove alongside her. She parked near a yoga studio and stepped out. She looked around before entering an alley. She took another glance around herself before getting into another automobile. She hugged and kissed the driver, and they drove away. I could barely blink. I tightened my jaw and parked my car. I left and walked inside the yoga club. When I asked about Marissa's check-in, they denied giving me any personal information. I expressed my concern for her and insisted on knowing if she was present. They informed me that they had no clients with such names. I returned to my car and waited, and I'm not sure what came over me. But when the other car arrived, I started filming. A man got out and opened her door for her, hugged and kissed her, then smacked her buttocks as she walked joyfully to the parking lot. So much for yoga, Marissa. I departed before she could reach the parking lot. So my father cheated on my mother, and now he is being cheated on. Karma. Dad called me several times, but I did not answer. We'll see what happens, because all I want to do now is go and question Marissa about everything. Should I update? Hey everyone. I believe this will be the last update, and I understand it's a week late and you anticipated it sooner, but so much occurred this week. First, I mustered up the courage to confront Marissa. I went when Dad was not home. Ash was sleeping. I asked if she had a yoga class that day. She claimed she had it every day, including Sundays. She was in the kitchen preparing noodles. I asked her who her yoga instructor was. She selected a random name. I asked her whether that was a male. She said no and laughed. Why would I take a boy? She said. I told her it was interesting that she had a female one while the club she attended didn't have any female instructors. She corrected me, but her tone was odd, and her hands were no longer swirling the pasta sauce. I told her I had joined the club yesterday, and that's what they told me. She questioned how I knew where her club was. I informed her that I had followed her the last time I went. She dropped a spoon. I picked it up, and she turned around. What are you getting at? She inquired. So I told her what I'd seen. She denied it, as expected. I claimed I witnessed it with my own eyes. She shrugged and said my father would never believe me. I took out my phone, played the video, and assured her that he would believe his own eyes at the very least. She stood stunned and was silent for a minute. Her expressions returned to normal, and she resumed cooking the pasta. She claimed it didn't matter anymore. She was already preparing for a divorce. My eyes expanded. This woman was horrible. Granted, my father earned it all, but oh, she is a snake. She told me that the person she meets at the club has been her lover for 3 years. They rekindled their romance when it was safe. She claimed they had fallen in love years earlier, but he was married to another woman whose father had hired him for his company. There was a lot at stake, but Marissa and her lover agreed that he would prefer to retain his marriage and settle his debts. Then, he'd divorce his wife and start seeing Marissa. But when Marissa became pregnant, she felt compelled to seek help from a man, as all women should. That's how she decided to retain Dad. They had an on and off relationship until Marissa met her lover and became pregnant. So she chose Dad and told him he needed to do something about it. He said he got cold feet, so she decided to take matters into her own hands. That's when she spoke to her mother. Her sweetheart is now a widower and business owner. She is ready to depart, she said. Women should do what they can. She turned around and smiled, but it stopped as she peered over my shoulder. Her smile vanished in the next second. I spun back to see Dad in the doorway, fists balled and eyes angry. He was shaking. Then Dad woke Ash awake and led her to the kitchen. He asked her who her father was. She looked at Marissa and shook her head. She informed him she didn't care about blood because she always knew he was her father. He brushed his fingers through his hair and paced the floor. Marissa and Ash were told to leave his house within the next 2 days. The divorce is in progress. Ash and Marissa are staying at a shelter. Dad has begged me to find him a therapist, and he has apologized profusely since. I forgave him every time. Like Marissa, her lover did not take her in. He denies any contact with her. I have proof, and Marissa has asked for it. She even requested that I think of Ash during her pregnancy. What can I say to Marissa? Your child is your problem. What shall I do? Should I delete the footage or hand it over? I'll update the comments later. Thank you for joining me, making suggestions, and providing support. It means a lot.